Welcome to the Millionaire University podcast. I'm your host, Brien Gearin, with you today. And on this edition of the MU Pod, I'm joined by John Wilson. He's the owner of Wilson Plumbing and Heating, a $26 million home service company in Akron, Ohio, with its eyes set on becoming a $100 million company. John is also the host of the Owned and Operated podcast and produces the Owned and Operated newsletter that shares his industry insights and helps others build their home service businesses. John, from one Ohio into another, man, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. This will be a lot of fun.
Yeah, dude, I'm super stoked. And today we really just want to learn all about your business, from its origins to the present day to the future, how you plan on dominating your industry and getting to $100 million. I want to talk about it all. So we have a lot to unpack, but let's start right at the top with your origin story. How did you get into this business and how'd you get where you're at today?
Yeah. So the origin story is pretty unglamorous. So my family had a very small plumbing company. So I grew up in the plumbing company. After school, I would go and, put parts away. I would take out the trash from like 10 on. And I was able during the summer, I was able to work hands on the tools from maybe 13, 14 on. And I developed an interest in the trade, mainly, frankly, just because I liked making money. Like it wasn't that complicated. I just wanted to be independent and make my own money. So yeah, by my late teens, I had graduated high school and I just went to work inside the business. I tried college a few times and it just didn't end up being for me. So I worked as a plumber, and by 18, 19, I was a somewhat competent plumbing technician, which is kind of cool to have a trade that young. And the business was really small. So, it had been around for a while. My grandfather actually started it. It had maybe 6 people or so when I started full time in 2009, and worked in it for a few years. And my dad and I have a pretty big age gap. So it's about 40 some years between us. So as I was sort of entering my career, we had this unique opportunity that he was exiting his, and he was looking for a way to transition the business. Again, very small business. So I actually started taking over the business at 23, which is far too young in my mind for what I knew at the time. And I bought it at 25. So at the time, there was about 8 people and $1 million of revenue. And that was about 8 years ago. So since then, we've gone from 8 people to 150, and we've gone from $1 million of revenue to 26. So it's been a heck of a ride over the last 8 years.
Wow. Okay. So you see, you made the comment 23 being way too young to be to be operating $1 million business, but obviously you caught on quickly. What were at the time being $1 million business, you said you bought the business at 25. What were you feeling at that time? Were you like completely overwhelmed, or were you just like, hell yeah, let's go. Like, this is mine now. We're going to drive this. How did you find your direction?
Well, and I'm going to clarify. I don't know that 23 is too young to run $1 million business. I'm saying 23 is too young for someone else to trust you to run their $1 million business.
There you go.
Because looking back, I'm like, yeah, I did it. But also looking back, I'm like, why did you let me do it?
What are you thinking, Dad?
Yeah, like, are you good? But no, obviously, like, it's possible. It's a thing. So just like anybody else, I thought I knew everything. So I started running after it and thought I could do better. In some cases, I was right, and in some cases, I was wrong. But yeah, we pretty much went after it as fast as we could. I had sort of, every day I wake up and walk into the largest company I've ever worked in. So I frequently, because I've been on this ride now I'm 33. So because I've been on this ride now for 15 years, it's nostalgic. So I'll think back and I'll be like, wow, I can't believe the ride we've gone on or whatever. But yesterday, we're wrapping up this year at 26, and we're finalizing our budget for next year, and it's about 34, 35. And I remember being 22 or 23 and like sitting in this very specific spot outside of our old shop and like telling my dad, like, hey, yeah, here's what we're going to do with the business. We're going to blow it up. We're going to cross $20 million. We're going to, just sort of explaining what I was planning on doing. And he's like, I have no idea how you're going to do that. And I was like, I don't either. And, and 8 years later, like, yeah, we did it, which is crazy. But yeah, I think we just pursued it hard, and we didn't really know how we were going to do it. And the way that we ended up growing this big, I don't think I would have guessed a decade ago when I first, set that target. But, a decade later, we grew a lot through acquisitions. We grew a lot through running a good business and best practices groups. And I'm going to be honest, at 23, I didn't know how to acquire anything. And I sure as hell didn't know what a best practices group was.
Hmm.
So I don't think you need a roadmap. I think you just need a target. And that's why we're so passionate about this $100 million target. If you ask me today, like, how are you going to get there? I'll give you a rough idea. I think I know a couple of the steps, but we'll do an interview in 4 years and I'll tell you how I did it, because we
Yeah.
don't totally know yet.
Right, you're building it as you fly, right?
Yeah. I mean, you build as you fly, you be opportunistic if an acquisition target comes your way, and you figure it out. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it was just as we grew, we said yes to the right opportunities. So, when I bought the company at 25, and at 26, we had a company approach us and say, "Hey, I think we want to sell." I didn't know how to do that, but we figured it out, and we ended up doubling overnight. So then I was like, "Wow, okay, you can use acquisitions to really like supercharge these things." And then I went on to buy 8 more before I was 30. No investors, no whatever, just figured it out. Honestly, I didn't even know that the SBA was a thing until my 8th acquisition. Like, everything
Wow.
else was cash and seller notes, because I had no idea that a bank would ever lend on an acquisition. I thought that was like the craziest thing I've ever heard of. So yeah, you don't need to have it all figured out. You can just sort of go.
Yeah. So were you kind of going it alone at the ownership level, or I mean, maybe you had the help of your old man, but is there a partner in the business, or did someone come aboard or kind of rise through the ranks and become a partner in the business, or are you the head honcho all the way?
Yeah, my father and I co-ran it for a couple years, and then I bought out the rest of his share in 2019. I tried to bring on partners at different times, and I'm a stubbornly independent person, for better or worse. But I tried to bring on various partners at different times, and it just never seemed to really work. But the farther we got into it, the better it is that there's ultimately just one. So now I have sold at this point. I've sold a portion of the company to my president, but yeah, I still own the large majority.
So as you're starting to build and scale this thing, and as you're diving into acquisitions, how did you maintain the day to day? Like how did you build out systems and processes that ensure,
hmm
I guess, first and foremost, that the client work is getting done, that it's getting done well, that you're going to be getting referrals and not angry customers. What did it take to build out those systems and processes?
Yeah, I think the way a business grows is you grow through what I like to think of as plateaus. So you'll specifically home service, but really like agencies, anything with like an input of time, and humans as like the source of revenue. So if we're going to grow an agency or grow a plumbing company or grow a power washing or anything, it's all sort of the same problem. So you have these different plateaus in your business, and each plateau is a period of reinvestment, but it's also a period of like personal growth and professional growth and system development. So that first, 0 to $1 million, that's usually like the first time that people experience a plateau, because what they find is you have to add like an office person, a CSR or a dispatcher, or someone to help you administratively, so you're not working 14 hours a day trying to do the books, trying to book calls, trying to handle customer concerns while also like actively managing the field. So at each of these plateaus, I don't think I'm going to give a very gratifying answer here. The answer really is recognize if you're in a plateau. Like, that's it. So if you're feeling like capped, if you're feeling extended, and like there's not enough hours in the day, like, hey, welcome to the plateau. And that's a good thing, because if you're at a plateau, that means there's an answer. And the answer is some type of reinvestment. And when you do that reinvestment, systems get built for you. So if you're at $1 million, the reinvestment is that first office person. If you haven't done that yet. If you're at $2 to $3 million, that next investment is a field manager or a manager of some type to manage the revenue producers, and then you take a step back. If you're from $3 to $5 million, then you're actually getting ready for your second manager, who's going to manage a slightly different department. And when you bring on these managers and you bring on these structural employees, their job is to build systems and processes around the exact problems that you brought up. So how do we build process around our sales? How do we build process around our customer experience? How do we build process around our call booking and our scripts? I've never written one of our call center scripts, and I've never had to, because as we've gotten through these plateaus, we've hired people, and a part of their responsibility is to build the system that's going to allow us to continue to break past the next plateau. So I really think the answer isn't like, how do you do it? How you do it is by hiring people. And the way you hire people is you understand that you're in a plateau and you have to invest into people to get out of that plateau.
What was it like when you first hired out that first position, like you said, like an office manager or someone just below your level, but they're in charge of the day to day, like an ops manager? What was that first hire like?
Yeah.
Did you have hundreds of people you interviewed? Did you know what to look for? What did that look like?
It was
for you?
weird. Yeah, it was weird. So our first one came from an acquisition. So, I was running that company for maybe a year, the family company. And it had grown a little bit. We went from 8 to 13 team members. And we found this acquisition. This company was about to go bankrupt and they had 14 employees. So we acquired them. It was $105,000. I gave them 10 grand in cash because that's all I had. And the rest was a 6-year seller note, just actually paid off a couple months ago. And with them came managers. And it was crazy, like honestly, because suddenly you walk in, you're 26 years old, the entire team is double your age, and you have 3 managers out of nowhere and 30 employees or 28 employees. And you're like, how the hell did we get here? But it was odd. So it took a long time to figure out how to your perspective changes, right? So I think I said this last time, but professional growth and business growth, like you can only grow to what you can carry. And professional growth and personal growth are basically the same thing. So if I'm hiring a manager and I'm expecting that manager to run the day to day or perform this aspect of our company for us, I have to step back and I have to grow to be able to step back. And I have to learn how to become a person that gets things done through other people. And now, I have 150 team members. And I was a plumber 6 years ago, like literally. So we're now at a point where I have to get things done through multiple layers of people. And sometimes I do great and sometimes I do terribly. It just depends on the week. But I really think it's a personal growth of like, how am I going to be able to communicate more effectively? How am I going to be able to like hand over these tasks? And am I performing my job? Am I focusing on what I'm supposed to be focusing on? Which I think is where most owners or new entrepreneurs totally bomb it, is they don't understand what they're supposed to be doing as the owner or the entrepreneur. So like I'll see, it's really common as we bought all these companies, we'll see these companies that are like $3 million. And the owner's driving like a nicer car than I am. And like he's got his lake house and he's got his boat and he's like not there very frequently. And maybe that's the right thing for some people, but like I wanted to get rich. I didn't need a boat. So those are like different contrasting problems. So maybe if all you want is the boat, then like I'm sure that's perfect for you. But like I wanted to beat Buffett. So when you're in that ownership seat and you're bringing on these managers to run different parts of your company, you have to understand, okay, if they're freeing up my time, what is my time now supposed to be doing? Like, where should I be spending my energy? And maybe that's selling, or maybe that's running field operations, or maybe that's building systems, maybe that's hiring. It probably depends on where you're at in your company. But I really feel like dialing in like what you're supposed to be doing at that stage is important, because when you break that $3 million mark and the business starts producing 300 to 500,000 in free cash flow, like that's when people start doing dumb stuff and not really focusing on how to get the business to where it can go. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
absolutely. So using that point as an example, when you reached it, how did you know what your next steps were going to be outside of just your general ambition?
Yeah. I mean, I'm obsessive. So I always, I don't think I ever lost sight of the goal. Now, the target at the time wasn't $100 million. Like, I remember I thought when you're young and you're like, and I guess I'm still young, but like when you're just starting out and you're like projecting what you think you can do, it's really challenging to communicate that goal because the goal is so ridiculous.
Mhm.
Like, so me, I didn't even, you know, I would say I have a strong track record at this point, but like until a couple of years ago, I didn't comfortably feel like I could tell people like, hey, I think I can steward this business to $100 million. And because that's a big number.
Yeah.
And I also still to this day am not quite comfortable telling people what I actually think I can take this business to, because 100 million is not it. Like, I think I
Mhm.
can go further. I believe that I'm capable of taking it beyond that. And I think it's I think if you can get obsessed with the target, more obsessed with than like enjoying the journey, right? Then what that journey might get you along the way. I think that's when it gets interesting. But as I just don't think I ever got really distracted. Like, I had various side projects, but every single side project was to make more money. It wasn't like I have not yet had the inclination to buy a Lambo. I have more than enough money to buy a few. I don't feel the need.
Yeah.
But I do really want to run $100 million company, and that is much more interesting to me than doors that go up.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're growing, I guess what's the pace that you guys are growing year over year?
We're up 50% this year.
Wow. Okay, congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, our compounded annual growth is around 38.
Wow. So when you're growing at that rate, how do you ensure that you still grow profitably? Because I think we hear a lot of stories of like grow or at all costs. Profitability be damned, which to me that's a terrible, terrible mindset. How do you ensure? Because a lot of companies die by growing so fast that they fart out because everything else got forgotten in pursuit of revenue. How do you guys fend off against that? And how do you ensure that you're still growing at a profitable rate and not just for the fact of you want to hit that revenue number?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's a hard one. Like, I don't think we've done that perfectly. I think we're a lot better now than we used to be. I think some of it depends on what stage of the company are you in, and are you at or near that next plateau? Because ultimately, it's the plateaus that will break you. Because the plateaus are the things that require the most risk. They require the most reinvestment. So if you're going to be unprofitable, then that's when you're going to be unprofitable.
Hmm.
So I'll give an example. When it was just last year. So we were crossing 15 million, and 15 million is a really challenging size. Up until about 50, I'd say that that's like the big nut to crack. 50 opens up a whole other can of worms, but 15, you're adding structure. So you can basically just sell your way up to 15 million, and you can run a super lean infrastructure, and you can have like one manager have 25 direct reports, and I see it all the time. And out of that 15 million, like, you might be like ripping 2 to 3 million of cash. Like, it can be
Wow.
a lot because there's no overhead, like, or very little overhead. Like, oh yeah, I've got 4 or 5 call takers, I've got a dispatcher, I've got 2 managers, which is basically the same overhead structure as a $5 million business. So, but you're producing triple that. But the problem is, between 15 and 20 million, most businesses don't really get over that hump. Like, that's a really big hump. And the reason is, you have to add $2 million of payroll to get over that hump.
Wow.
And that is a lot of freaking money.
Yeah.
Like, you have to build an accounting team, not just a bookkeeper. You have to build an HR team, not just a part-time person that does your hours. You have to build a marketing team, 4 or 5 people. You have to bring on managers, and like a lot of managers, because it can't just be one guy with 25 direct reports. It's like one manager for every 8 to 10 people. And that's a totally different overhead structure. And that is when businesses get their butts kicked. It's during the reinvestment. So my answer is, how do you grow profitably? It's understand which phase you're in. Because if you're in the reinvestment phase, then you need to get the hell out of there as fast as you can. Like, you do need to grow at all costs, because you just reinvested like crazy, and you have to drive revenue and outpace those costs, or invest much slower. But my personal preference is get through it. But if you're past those costs, slow down and really focus on your margin, which is where we're at now. We're past that point of reinvestment, and we're really honed in on, are we growing profitably? Is our gross margin best in class or close to it? And how can we improve it? But I think it's really like, where are you at in the process? Because the answer is different depending on where you are.
Okay. So, and as you're growing this thing, are you guys, so you're in Akron, Ohio, not a massive metropolis, but you're just south of Cleveland.
Right.
Are you guys growing and you're acquiring businesses, acquiring their book of customers? Are you guys growing into different regions? Are you still just in
Mhm.
Akron? Are you moving up to Cleveland, or is the plan to be like all over Ohio? What does that growth look like to get to 100 mil?
Yeah. So the way my industry typically grows is it's multi-market. So we're gonna follow the well-trod path
Hmm.
and go multi-market. The problem that you face is you have to have a level of sophistication that frankly we don't have yet. I don't think we're there yet. If we tried to go multi-market today, even at 26 million, I know that sounds like a lot of money if you're just starting off, and it is. You're missing key pieces, mainly in like structural leadership, systems and processes, and frankly enough money to burn that you can just go launch another location and not mind if you lose $1 million in the process,
Hmm.
which I don't think we're there yet. But our plan's multi-market, so we're going to take some time in the next 2 years, really depending on our maturity here in our single location and market. We're going to launch into new markets, and we have a strategy built around that. We're excited for it. We've started to test it a little bit, and we feel confident that it's going to be a little bit unique. So we think we're going to succeed and just aggressively grow behind those.
Okay.
Our business is a little bit more complicated because we're three trade. The locations have to be larger to support the additional needed infrastructure. Whereas if I was just a plumbing company like a Mr. Rooter or something like that, you can support a much smaller operation in each market. So that's something to think about as you're growing. How complicated are you making your business? Because it does ultimately impact your ability to grow into new markets. I now, instead of just launching plumbing or HVAC or electric into Toledo or Columbus or Pittsburgh or whatever, I have to launch three different trades with three different teams, different managers. It's a much more complicated launch.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't think about that because when you have the different disciplines all under one roof, you can't
Yeah,
just go in and do one.
right. I mean, you can sort of
What?
start that way and then just slowly add them, which is how most people do it. But it does add a lot of complication. Versus, I'll see like one Tom Plumber franchise. A
Mhm.
lot of their locations are only $2 million, and that totally works because $2 million, that's 5, 6 plumbers, one manager, one CSR, and an owner, and sounds easy.
Yeah.
The multi trade complicates it.
Yeah. Those guys are based down by me.
Yeah, they're in Cincinnati, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I met the owner lives in my town. Like he's one town right over from us. I
Yeah,
met him probably 5 or 6 years ago when they were still pretty small, and just to see
yeah,
how they've exploded is
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
And actually, they're my plumber.
Yeah. No, they're great. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they're able to support a much smaller infrastructure where if I went to a new market, most people with three trades aren't even profitable until they're driving 15 million in a new market. So like that comparison is kind of wild. Like one Tom can go drop a $2 million branch and like feel good about it. And I have to get to 15 million as fast as possible for it to be worth my time, which is
Mm.
kind of insane. That's a huge difference.
Yeah, yeah. So I have to ask then, if you're looking at going multi-city, is franchising a part of what you want to do, or is this I mean, it's franchising a whole different ballgame, obviously, or is it you're going down the road of this is going to be Wilson Plumbing, we're just going to be multi-location?
Honestly, we're thinking about both. So the reason that franchising is potentially on the table for us is you referenced it earlier, but with owned and operated, we have a really large audience of people who either want to buy a plumbing company or HVAC company, so they're really interested in acquiring into the space, or they're interested in starting one, or they own a small one currently, and that's the majority of the audience. So we've strongly considered, hey, is this the way to growth? Do we just launch a franchise on the back of this media business? And is that how we sort of introduce ourselves to the rest of the US? So it's something we're thinking a lot about. I suspect it would be a different project from Wilson going Greenfield.
Hmm. Absolutely. Are there major drawbacks to doing that are you're currently considering?
To franchising?
Yeah, to franchising versus sticking it, keeping it under all company ownership.
Honestly, no. And I'm good friends with Ellen Rohr, and she launched Benjamin Franklin Plumbing, and she launched Zoom Drain. And like I'm talking to her about, hey, what does this actually look like? It really is something that we're thinking about because I think it makes sense.
Very
And I
cool.
don't particularly want to. Well, I think it makes sense, and I think from like who am I serving as a customer? I think that entrepreneurs that want to like better their life, that sounds like a fun customer to serve. And that's the customer of our franchise is the franchise, the franchisee. So I think that would be fun. I think being able to like support people and help them drive their goals and help them figure out how to grow this business and support their family and like that sounds like a fun person to like cater to.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it sounds like fun and frankly I think it's sort of inevitable.
Okay. Well, you heard it here first, folks. There's going to be Wilson franchises coming soon, coming to
Yeah.
near you
I don't know what
soon.
we'll call it. I have no idea what we'll call it, but
Yeah.
I do think it's sort of inevitable.
Very cool. I love it. So I want to talk a bit more at a granular level, whether you're $26 million or you're $1 million or you're just getting started. The marketing aspect of a trades business, when you're going B2C, I imagine a lot of your, the majority of your folks are residential. I'm sure you guys do plenty of commercial too. But what does marketing look like when you're first starting out? And then it'd be great to hear, we've heard a little bit already about how that kind of grew into you needed a team. What do you have on that?
Yeah. So I would actually say we're really good at this conversation. You just referenced, hey, I bet you do a bunch of commercial work. And the answer is we do almost none. So we are
Okay.
98 or 99% residential. And that's a really important point to make when you're talking about marketing because we know who our customer is. And if we want to break down all marketing really is choosing who you're going to work for every day. And that is it.
Hmm.
And we can make that look like a lot of different things, but that's all it is. And we've chosen that we want to work for homeowners with a specific demographic and a specific geography with a few other qualifications. And when you nail down who that target customer is, that's when you start figuring out how do you find them. But it really starts with that first part of like, who am I looking for? Who do I want to work for? And who do you want to work for? You pick that off of a bunch of different things. Like, hey, do I want giant tickets and contracts? Well, that's probably going to be a B2B. Like we're going to go out and get some restaurants. We're going to sign some contracts to clean their drains or, whatever. If we're looking for people to do a ton of small jobs, but maybe higher margin and much faster cash flow, that's going to be consumers like homeowners. So, and that's what we've optimized for. So the first step in marketing is just picking who you want to work with and being ready to say no to everybody that's not who you want to work with. And then once you identify, honestly, that's kind of the hard part because it's not that challenging once you nail down who you want to work for. So if I want to work for homeowners, okay, great. Like, how do I get homeowners? Well, we can use Google, we can use Facebook. I can go knock on their door. There's a bunch of different ways. But once you really get zoned in on like, hey, this is the one customer that I want, and all I have to do is get in front of that one customer, it's much easier. But when we were a lot smaller, our target customer was like anybody that had plumbing or HVAC systems. So we were trying to market to churches. We were going after schools. I was working on restaurant contracts. We were also trying to get homeowners. And because it was so distracted, we basically didn't get anywhere. Like we grew the business a little bit because we were trying something, but it's nothing like what happens now. I mean, our marketing spend is like 5% of revenue and we're up 50% year over year. And it's because we're so dialed in on who we want. Getting in front of them just isn't that complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an absolutely perfect way to put it. As somebody who's in the marketing, owns a marketing business myself, that is the absolute key is who do you want to get in front of? And then we go get in front of them. Where are they? What are they doing? Like, just go be there.
Everybody overcomplicates this. It's really not that challenging. And like knocking on doors, like go for it. It's just like, well, that's where your target customer is. They're at home. So like, go talk to them.
Go ask for business.
Yeah, like that's really it. So when you identify who you're going to work for and you identify like, hey, my business is really good at this. And that decision of who I'm going to work for goes way beyond marketing. So I got to hit this really quick because I think it's important. It goes so far beyond marketing because who you're going to work for determines who you're going to hire, which is going to determine your compensation structure. It's going to determine the types of vehicles you drive and what's in those vehicles. It's going to determine your physical location, like size, scope, what's in the office. It's going to determine your overhead staffing, your tech stack. It is literally everything. Like it touches every single part of our business, us determining that we are going to be a B2C home service company. And our company would be completely different if we were serving restaurants primarily, like just an absolutely different organization. So yeah, and frankly, we would flop if we tried. Like we would not do well at it because we are built to serve homeowners.
Yeah, it's where, kind of the old saying, riches are in the niches, right? You
Yeah.
can niche down to who you serve, and when you focus hard on those people or that
Hmm.
cohort, then now that audience is going to realize that, oh, these people are dialed in on me,
Yeah.
people like me. Why wouldn't I want to work with them, right? Why shouldn't I have them come solve my problem?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
The most
incredible.
counter logical thing that we've continually proven right is the less we do, the bigger we grow. So the less job types, the less tasks, the less customers, the bigger we grow because we're able to get more and more dialed and more focused. And you start building these structures around this perfect system. So, like the way we do warehousing and job type. So, if I sell a water heater, we are more equipped to run that water heater faster and more profitably than most other plumbing companies because we sell 1,500 water heaters a year. Like we are dialed in on water heaters specifically to homeowners.
Yeah.
So you just continue to get better. And because you get better, you can pour more marketing dollars in, you can hire better. So it really like the less you do and the more focused you get, the more the business continues to blow up. And I don't even think I'm the best example of this. There's a Leaf Filter. Like they built $1 billion business until they sold to private equity. And most of it was literally gutter guards.
Yeah.
And that was the business. Gutter guards for homeowners, like absolutely wild. Like I can't think of a more focused business than us. And I feel distracted. I feel like, oh my God, I'm doing too many things. And I have literally 20 job types, like 20, whereas most plumbing companies have like probably 150. And I'm down to 20 tasks that we do. And I still feel like I'm distracted because this guy built $1 billion company on the back of one.
Wow. So does that mean in terms of what you offer, if you're at a house and you fix or they have a problem or you maybe discover another problem while you're there, even though it's something you could probably do you say we don't handle this? This is we do these 20 things and this would be number 21? Or is it like how do you avoid scope creep, or where do you draw that line as to what you offer and what you don't offer?
Yeah, I would say at this point we're still covering the home. But like if someone said, "Hey, I think we need to get into like foundation wall repair because it touches sewers, downspouts and other things that are adjacent," I'd say not our bag.
Gotcha.
We used to do bath remodels. Touches a
Oh,
lot of plumbing, touches a lot of electric. A lot of plumbing companies do it. Not our bag. We've consistently dropped job types over the years. We just dropped septic tank replacements. And that's like we do sewer replacements every day. And we dropped that one specific thing because our gross margin was low. It took us too long. We weren't succeeding in that service line. So we killed it. And it was $1 million a year service line. And by killing it, we were able to bring on a much more profitable service line that was much closer to our actual focus.
okay. And then just out of curiosity, it's Wilson heating, cooling, and electric. Or what am I missing?
So Wilson Plumbing, Heating,
Plumbing.
Cooling, and
Yeah, there
Electric.
we go.
Yep.
So was it always those three practices, or was there a part where you said, "Hey," and kind of along the lines here of making keeping your blinders on and doing
Yeah.
specific things? Was that all part of the plan, or was it you keep your blinders on in these three specific areas that we handle?
No, so there's two different ways to grow a service business. I'm one example of one. The other is one Tom. And like if we think about it like that, that's probably the best way to think about it. So I'm a young guy. I have two young kids, and I really value being able to put them down to bed at night, which means not a lot of work travel. And I've sort of built my life around how do I not travel a lot? So if you're densely geographically focused, then one of the fastest ways to grow your business is by adding additional services because you're not going to grow geographically. So that's what we did. We added additional services. We added HVAC. We added electric. Primarily did it through acquisition. And we did that, frankly, for my lifestyle because I didn't want to be traveling a lot while I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. One Tom is the opposite example. And I would say it's a much simpler business where hey, we just do plumbing or we just do drains or whatever it is, and we're going to do that in 500 markets. But it means you have to travel or somebody's traveling,
Hmm.
which I was not personally up for. But yeah, those are basically the two different paths to growth. Like, are we going to add additional scope, or are we going to add additional geographies with a very limited scope? So the gutter guards, they, one job type, a lot of markets. One Tom, similar, one trade, a lot of markets. I intentionally went into this knowing that, hey, additional job types is going to be complicated for all the reasons it's complicated, but it was a lifestyle decision.
Well, and it's one of the best things, in my opinion, that a business can do, or maybe one of the smartest things is
Mhm.
go generate more revenue from the people who already provide your revenue, right? Like somebody who you've done plumbing for the last 3 years, probably at some point in time, they're going to need electrical work or they're going to need, new HVAC system, right?
Yeah.
So as you're able to, if you're making, $2,000 a year off of Joe Smith, and you could make another 2,000 off of his electrical problems and another 2,000 off of his HVAC problems, why wouldn't you do that, right? It's generating more revenue from those who have already been acquired, right? They already know, like, and trust you, and it's way cheaper than going out and acquiring a brand new
Mhm.
customer. So it makes a lot of sense.
It does make sense. Where it gets complicated is subscale, because I'll often walk into like a $3 or $4 million business that's also doing plumbing, HVAC, and electric, and it's like, my guys, you do not have the infrastructure to do this correctly. I wouldn't have had, like, nobody can do this correctly at this size. It's just too many totally different things. So I really think it starts to make more sense the larger you get. But even at 26 million, I would argue that we are probably too small to be multi-trade. Like, the people that are best in class in our industry stayed one trade until 30 to 50 million. Like, one trade.
Wow.
And they grow faster, they grow more profitably. It's easier to enter new markets. So yeah, I think it does make sense. I think it adds a lot of complication that the earlier you do it, the more complicated.
So one thing I want to touch on as we get up against the bell here, I think is super important at any organization, but especially in a business like yours, is the culture, the team
Mhm.
buy-in. How do you drive the culture at your company? Because I learned this years ago when I worked at a trades company where if you don't have the buy-in of the technicians, the people that do the hard work, and everybody in the office and everybody on the phones, it's really tough to keep growing your business at the rate you're growing. And obviously, this is something that you're doing well. What's it like when it comes to building, growing, and driving that culture?
Yeah. I really think it can be pretty simple. Do we treat people with respect, and do we create them opportunities to make a lot of money? And I don't think it has to be much more complicated than that. If you can build a compensation structure that you win and while your team is winning, then you've done a good job. Now, if you build a compensation structure that your team wins and you lose, that's a problem. Or vice versa. If the company wins and the team member loses, that's also a problem. But we see our continued growth as creating win-win wins. So win for the customer, win for the tech, win for the company. And I just don't think it's much more complicated than that. At the end of the day, people come to work to make a living, and ideally, they make a really good living, and they do it for you. And if they don't do it for or with you, then they'll do it for and with somebody else.
Right, exactly. And I think as a customer, you can tell if you're working with a good company or not if the technician or the employee who's on site doing the work, if they're enjoying themselves, if they seem like genuinely happy people, then it's a great assumption to make that the company they're working for is treating them darn well.
Yeah,
Yeah, and a happy customer is all about, or a happy employee leads to happy customers. So I think
yeah,
that's one of the most important things that as you grow in leadership, if you're starting a business and growing a business, being able to install that culture and guide it is a huge part of success.
yeah. I
Yeah.
totally agree. Yeah, and I think sometimes we've won, sometimes we've lost in this journey, but overall, I think that we've won.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we round out here, I kind of want to get your opinion on the future of the trades. I think
Yeah.
we're in somewhat of a renaissance for the trades right now, and there's people out there like Cody Sanchez and
Hmm.
other folks who are bringing, yourself included, bringing tons of attention to the trades and
Yeah.
to the fact that the education system here in America, the higher ed system, is broken beyond
Yeah.
recognition. What's your opinion on the future of the trades and business ownership and entrepreneurship, especially in the trades?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the trade is where I'll start. So, first off, I think I'm excited in general. Like one of my favorite things is we have 25-year-olds buying houses. And like that's freaking awesome. Like we have
Hmm.
these like young guys starting families, buying houses, and that is just the coolest thing to be a part of that. So I think if you're thinking about the trades, I know we're here for entrepreneurship, but whether it's through entrepreneurship or it's through a company, there's a ton of opportunity. And what I think where it depends on the trade part happens is some trades are a lot more complicated than others. And in plumbing, HVAC, electric, it's really not the best time to be launching a competitor to the most consolidated industry that we've seen in 20 years. I mean, you're going up against literal billion-dollar players competing for every single lead. You will not be able to get leads. So I would advise against it. You can still make hundreds of thousands of dollars working for working for a company. But in much less consolidated industries like roofing is pretty early consolidation, ton of opportunity. Power washing, the landscaping, all these different opportunities. I mean, even just pest control and doing it classic. Pest control is pretty consolidated, but what's nice about that is you can sell them so small that it's irrelevant. If you get it to $1 million ARR, like you can sell that thing for $3 million and you can get it there
Hmm.
in a year. Like you just go knock on a bunch of doors. So I'm excited about it, and I'm excited about the ability for entrepreneurs to come in and do cool stuff. I would just pick your target wisely, and the big thing there is who am I competing against? And if you're competing against, like I'm going to give some examples in Phoenix, Arizona, it's one of the hottest markets for plumbing, HVAC, electric right now. And these companies that are backed by billion-dollar funds are getting absolutely crushed because they aren't getting leads. And these guys are spending millions and millions of dollars on leads. So you're going up against companies that are spending $20 million a year just in Phoenix to get leads. And I have friends that are trying to launch home service companies there in against these guys, and they're not getting leads. And it's like, yeah, they just spent $20 million to get leads. Like, how do you think, how do you reasonably think you're going to go up against that? So pick your target wisely, and who am I going to compete against? Because you're really like David and Goliath is a fun story, but you really don't want to be David if you don't have to be.
Oh, I love that. That's such a great point there. Don't have to be David if you don't have to be.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
there's just a lot. I mean, roofing is still early, fencing is still early. There's so many opportunities that aren't competing against Goliath.
Hmm.
Like, just choose your target wisely.
Yeah, I think that's great advice because there's so many opportunities in home services, residential service
So
providers,
many.
so many opportunities out there. And it also depends on your region too. Like, if you're in an average Midwestern city, you might have massive opportunity for power washing because nobody's there yet, or it's just a bunch of little guys. Or, one of my clients is a critter removal company. And we're absolutely crushing it here because he's outspending most of them by far. But all the leads are coming to him. Like there's
Yeah.
everybody else is a mom and pop shop or, a guy in a
Yeah.
busted out Chevy that nobody wants getting their animals anyway. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's
Well, I
unconsolidated.
have a friend that launched a power washing thing, and he went up to 10 locations, $30 million a year business. They did in like 6 or 7 years. And I was like, dude, like walk me through this. He's like, dude, there's no one to compete against. Like nobody cares. I have a friend that launched a stump grinding business, and that is literally all that they do is stump grinding. And it's a $3 million business. And they did that in like a year and a half.
Wow.
And he subcontracts the stump grinding. He didn't even have to hire or buy equipment. Like it's the wildest business to me. And he's like, dude, nobody's doing it. Or like, I think there's a huge opportunity out there right now for chimney cleaning and like chimney replacement, like masonry work,
Yeah.
because it's sort of like water mitigation, which you stack on top of a plumbing company, but chimney you stack on top of HVAC. So
Yeah.
you could build this giant chimney sweeping company or this giant chimney repair company, and you can sell the leads or eventually launch HVAC, but you can sell these leads off to HVAC companies and you can build a $5 million a year business.
Yeah.
We broke down that business a couple months ago on our show, and there was a guy doing $15 million. It was $5 million a market in like chimney cleaning and chimney repair. 5 million bucks a year per market. He was in 3 markets, and it was like an insane business. And there was nobody else touching that business. Like it's like
Yeah.
one guy per city.
Yeah, it's incredible. One of my clients here in Cincinnati is the biggest chimney sweep company and fireplace
Hmm.
insert company here in town.
Yeah.
And we absolutely crush it because it's the same thing with the
Yeah.
critter guy. The competition is all very small. They're disorganized. There's no
Yep.
consolidation at all. And it makes it way easy to not even have to spend that much in digital
Yeah.
ads, like
Yeah.
to still dominate. It's incredible.
And yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, pick your target, man. Like, you don't want to go up against the $1 billion guy. Like, you don't. Companies right now, they're getting smoked in my industry. You want to go up against the two-man shop, and you want to
Right.
go up into an industry that has a ton of two-man shops, and that's all that they have, and you can sweep the floor in like a month. Like,
Yep.
that's what you want. Easy
Absolutely.
competitors that you can just pick off.
Yep. There's a bunch of my friends that are working, their businesses are remote cleaning services, and it's
Yeah.
just, it's not consolidated. Like they are
Yep.
absolutely
That's a
dominating.
great one.
So,
Yeah.
there's
But yeah,
opportunities
pick your target
everywhere.
wisely.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, John. Well, I know I need to get you moving here. I want to make sure that all our loyal listeners can get a hold of you, can check out Owned and Operated,
Yeah.
whether it's the newsletter, your podcasts. What's the best way to do all of that?
It's pretty easy. Ownedandoperated.com. So every week we're talking about how we are building our company every single day. Gives you a really good perspective in how scaling a mid-sized to large home service company looks.
I love it. I love it. All right. Ownedandoperated.com. Hop on that Owned and Operated newsletter. Check out the podcast, guys.
Mhm.
Hey, John, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a ton of awesome knowledge nuggets here. I really appreciate your time, and we wish you the best in getting to that $100 million mark.
Thanks for having me on.
All right.